fire smoke detectors in a place where if I use it. Welcome to Labor Vision. It's a monthly live call-in show with issues that affect Missoula and the labor community, and obviously Missoula citizens as a whole. Tonight we have Mike Bennett, who's the Ward 1 councilman, and he was elected in '92, and he's been serving since '93. Why don't we start off? Well, first I should mention that if you'd like to if you have a question about the City Council or Ward 1 of the Rattlesnake, you can call in at 542-6228, 542-MCAT. And Mike, I think I want to start off, and since you started, how is your feeling towards the City Council now than before you started running?
Well, I don't think my basic opinions have changed, or philosophy. It's a learning experience being on it. You get to understand a little bit more about the the nuts and bolts aspects of government, but as far as philosophical issues and some of the larger policy issues, I don't think that being on the council really has changed my basic feelings or attitudes very much. It's still an important job, and it's one of trying to represent the citizens who generally don't have the time to go down and sit in on the committee meetings and keep track of everything that government does.
Well, it does take quite a bit of time, though, to know all the procedures and all the budget procedures, and it is quite complicated, isn't it?
Yeah, probably the most interesting thing is, in terms of learning that I've gone through, was the land use issues. So much of that isn't based on simply your opinions of things. It's based on a lot of judicial requirements, legislative requirements. There's findings of fact that you have to have in hand if you're going to vote a certain way on these things, and you just about should be a lawyer before you try to do it, but fortunately, none of us are, so we've kind of done it from scratch. But it is not something that you can just go in and fly completely by the seat of the pants.
Now, you're from the Rattlesnake. How has the issues changed over the years from when you started to the issues now?
Well, the Rattlesnake is, I guess, sort of like, as one of the old German chancellors said about the Balkans. They generate more history than they can consume internally, and we generate more politics, I think, than we can consume internally. But the issues obviously have gone past annexation. That was the thing that really was the firestorm in the Rattlesnake when we first came in. At this point, that's pretty much a dead horse for most of the valley. We're in the city, and we need to accommodate that as best we can. We still have concerns regarding fire and emergency services, and the Fire Policy Planning Committee, if it can avoid getting completely bogged down in these city rural fire politics, hopefully will go a long way towards addressing some of those. And we also have the same kind of land use issues that we've had for the last several years. It's starting to shake out. I think development patterns are starting to make themselves somewhat obvious at this point. But we need to do more, and we need to follow up on it.
Well, it does get pretty well filled up, and I know that in talking to some of the old-timers that say they're surprised that the valley is filled up so much from the time that they were in the 30s and 40s to now, that it continues to be filled up.
Yeah, it has, but I think at least we've come a bit past 10 years ago when we had a comprehensive plan that was talking about 9,000 people in the Rattlesnake Valley. We're, I think, settling down to where we're really discussing details rather than the overall amount of growth we're going to see. There are only so many areas left in the valley that aren't in conservation easement that are developable, and really one of the crucial things we've got to deal with there is the question of do we allow growth but in a moderate level so that we don't have very expensive infrastructure projects that get necessitated by allowing a little too much. I mean, one of the things that we keep hearing about is widening Van Buren and Rattlesnake Drive, and there's a $5 million price tag attached to that. Yet we have the ability to, I think, manage without doing that if we keep growth to a reasonable level. If we don't, if we simply say, well, sure, let's pack them in, someone's going to have to pay that bill. And
Right.
unfortunately, with a lot of current city policy, someone often ends up being whoever happens to be in the neighborhood and is available for an SID.
Zoning has also been a problem there too, as far as zoning some tracts of land where there was an argument between whether we want the higher number of acres or units per acre developed or the lower units per acre developed. And to me, it seems like that the lower acreage might be better for both developers and the residents up there.
Yeah. And there's a current effort underway to revisit zoning. There's a number of citizens involved with it and some OCD staff people. It's in the preliminary stages right now, but I think the first step that's being taken is to identify the areas that are already built up. Places that already have housing in place, where we know what the density is, and
Right.
kind of taking those out of the equation and trying to get those lined up for zoning, and then dealing with the areas that aren't determined, the things that are up in the air, which is actually a much smaller question than the whole rattlesnake. And by putting zoning in place in the areas that are already built up, you prevent some of the, the kind of headaches we had when, like, say, Clark Fork School wanted to apply for
Right.
zoning, the recent Stanley subdivision that came through the council, and some of those kind of things.
It seems like some of the studies we've done, though, we've spent 15,000 here and 20,000 here, and they've not resulted in anything that's we've been able to use it, just kind of shoved on the shelf. And you see that a lot happening?
The city is kind of a study addict. It's I've never seen any place that's spent as much money studying things as the city does. And as you say, a lot of the money, I think, gets flushed down the toilet, especially on sewer studies, so to speak. But no, I think we can do a much better job in how we plan and how we use our resources there. In this case, the rattlesnake zoning revisitation, it's not a study. They haven't brought in a consultant. There's not a big budget for it. It's simply a matter of using some of the existing staff people and a lot of citizen volunteers to try to get the ball rolling. And so I don't think it's going to be a big budget item. And in fact, we can use a lot of what was done earlier in getting this brought to a head.
That's good, because I think a lot of ordinary citizens see that, plus things like the malfunction junction, the $500,000 for that. It's just they go through these long studies and not much is accomplished.
I couldn't agree with you more. The malfunction junction was a case where we spent the money, and then after we'd spent $500,000, essentially we got to the point of asking the citizens what they thought, and they said, "You're crazy." And we could have got that answer, I think, right off the bat and saved the $500,000. Unfortunately, there's a tendency in government in general, and in the Missoula government in particular, to want to have an expert giving an
Right.
opinion on anything we do. We want to pay somebody to have an opinion, and the more we pay them, it seems like the more we think their opinion's worth. And as Malfunction Junction, I think, demonstrated, that's not true. We had a case just this last Monday. We voted in another $450,000 out of the sewer R&D fund to pay a consultant from Seattle to come in and look at our sewer system and do some projections and do some things that probably all in all are useful things. And yet I think we could do an awful lot of them if we were to use our staff better, if we were to look at things that we could do without hiring $75 or $100 an hour consultants to do them.
Yeah.
If we could simply make some political decisions without necessarily having to have a consultant holding our hands when we do it.
Well, you'd almost think that if we're going to look at federal standards, if there is federal standards for those kinds of things, that we could just go to Washington, pull out the standards, and then upgrade to that, using that money instead of all the money for consultants and engineers and those kinds of things.
There are some things where either state or federal laws mandate that you have professional engineers doing them, or you have certain types of people doing them where you're basically forced to pay a high price. But we carry that over, I think, and we do a lot of things that we don't need to.
Well, let's go ahead and see what we got here. Hello, welcome to MCAT. You're on Labor Vision. Do you have a question?
No, I got a kind of a comment.
Whoops. No, I must have. I think I cut. If the guy can call back here, I cut you off there for a second. Sorry about that. Call back at 542-6228.
We're not taking any comments.
We'll get him back on again. Maybe he'll call back. But another thing that's... Here he is. Excuse me. Hello.
Hi, gonna cut me off again?
No.
Okay, what up? I've watched your programs, not just this one, but other programs, and you talk about the city government and how they're going to take our tax dollars and do this and take money from this and do this something else and this. I'm wondering when that our government, city government, state government, and federal government, when they're going to have to balance their tax dollars the way I have to balance my checkbook.
Okay, I guess the question would be a balanced budget or a balanced budget amendment?
Yes, we need to have something to where, like you and the gentleman beside you there, myself, we have to balance our checkbook at the end of each month. And if I'm, and if I don't balance it, if I take out too much, say I got $500 in the bank and I take out $502, well, a check bounces and I have to pay the penalties. Why can't the city government do the same thing? They have an allotted amount of money to use. Instead of raising my taxes every time they turn around to fix one thing or another, balance your checkbook at the end of each month or at the end of each quarter.
Okay, thank you. I guess the city does. Don't they have to balance the budget?
In terms of the budget, yes, they. I guess you've got another call you need to take here.
Well, go ahead and you can answer this one.
The city does balance the budget. They, in terms of being able to pay their bills, they're in good shape. They carry a cash balance from year to year, and they're not, running up things that are putting citizens in hock. They did have some SIDs in the past from the late 70s that had to be paid off. That were, I think, a question of poor planning on the city's part at that point.
Right.
But I think the heart of what the gentleman was talking about is the fact that not only should they balance their budget, but they should be a little more frugal in how they use the money that they take from citizens in terms of taxes. And I agree with that. I see an awful lot of things that, because the city's a monopoly, because any government agency tends to be a monopoly where there's no competition, there's nothing to force them to be efficient, that they don't use things as efficiently as they should. And that's part of our job as council people, is to try to see that they do use things more efficiently. Unfortunately, as a part-time job, it's very difficult. We did come very close, however, with regards to taxes this last budget, to cutting the city mill levy by $400,000 and cutting that off the tax bills. That failed on a 6-6 tie vote. That was a measure I introduced, and maybe next time we can get it through.
Well, good. Does that answer your question?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I think we lost it.
Yeah, 'cause I
Line
noticed
two went.
the balanced budget amendment in Congress especially is kind of going through, but there's both sides that say, well, it's simple, it's probably something that we need because the ordinary citizen has to balance his budget. But then...
And a lot of times you need something to give people in political office a little backbone. Frankly, it's when budget time comes around, you tend to hear an awful lot from the people that want to get something out of the budget, for whatever it is. And most of them are worthy causes, but the only way really that you have of saying no is, hey, look, we don't have any more money. And if you've got a blank, essentially a blank check, because you can borrow whatever you need, then you don't have any way to say, oh no, we can't do that, other than just taking up, stiffening your spine and saying it.
Well, it seems to me maybe we need more volunteerism in these days, where people volunteer their money to these groups and services that they want to pay for. And I think of programs like Habitat for Humanity is one example where they do a fine job, but yet the city is not openly handing them $20,000 or $30,000 to build houses.
Yeah, With regards to Habitat and Humanity in particular, the city has done a couple of things. I know we waived building permit fees, for instance, which I think that's great because a lot of what the government can do for affordable housing, I think, is simply to maybe be a little less intrusive and not be in the way quite so much. I think we do need to be careful about what really are legitimate community and government roles, as opposed to just things that would be, nice to have.
Right.
So,
I'd like to remind folks that if you want to call, our number down here is 542-6228, 542-MCAT, and we're visiting with Michael Bennett, who's the councilman for Ward 1, or council person.
one of two.
One of two. And there's one other issue that's come up recently is the annexation issue. And for the Rattlesnake and for other areas of the county, it's a big thing. And the mayor seems to think that he can force these people into annexation with things such as, we need to protect water quality, and we've got the sewer hookup. Should the citizens themselves vote on that?
Well, I think government's always better served when citizens have a voice in it. The reason I got involved in city politics in the first place, I think, it was a great deal of dissatisfaction with the the first Rattlesnake annexation and the subsequent treatment by the city.
Okay, let's go ahead and take. Hello, you're on Labor Vision. You have a question?
Yes, Councilman Bennett, could you explain how the $500,000 engineering contract on the sewer plan was bid? It just seems like a lot of money for a document. Maybe you could explain what they're going to do and be successful bidders. But in general, how was it decided that the contract would be given to the firm that won it?
Okay. Actually, that's probably one of my pet peeves with these consulting contracts is that, in fact, they are not bid. And by state law, cities and counties are not allowed to take competitive bids on these kinds of things. The way the state law currently reads, and I've helped put together a proposal which was taken to the legislature that would change this, but the way it currently works is that the city is required to put together a request for proposal, which is a document that says what it is that they want done. They send that out to firms that have indicated they have an interest in doing that type of work, and they get back proposals and lists of qualifications from those firms. Supposedly you select the firm that is best qualified, and then after you've selected them, you negotiate a price for whatever it is that you want to do. I'm in business, I run a business, and I've never seen anything done this way in any of the businesses I've been associated with, simply because you're hanging yourself out to dry. When someone already knows they have the business, there's no incentive to have a sharp pencil and to really cut costs as best you can. Also, I think in the consulting business in general, there's no real incentive to cut costs. A lot of times firms are judged as being better and more qualified if they do charge higher fees. So in this case, we set out several things we wanted done, we being the Public Works Department. Wanted to look at the capacity of the treatment plant, wanted to look at places that the sewer would serve, wanted to kind of plan for 20 years down the road, and there were a number of parts of that were included in this document. And the firm that was selected said, well, it'll take us X number of hours to do this and X number of hours to do that, and they take their basic labor rate, they add an overhead factor, I think, of 185% to their labor rate. They add a fee of 5% to that, and they add any subcontracting costs, and that's the bill that we end up paying. And the unfortunate thing about this particular study is that the money that's funding it comes out of the sewer R&D fund, which otherwise could be used to help cut the cost to homeowners of actually running sewer lines, and it hasn't been used for that in the past. So I really hate to see it spent quite this way.
I know for sewers that back up, do they ever get that sort of fixed up where either the city was at fault for that, or the homeowner itself?
Well, the city did put in a goodwill policy on sewer backups, which I think was a big improvement where I don't remember the exact dollar figures, but I think it's up to $3,000 to $5,000 that the city will pay if it's determined that the blockage in a sewer backup is in the main line rather than a property owner's line.
Right.
The idea there being if someone's flushing disposable diapers down their toilet and it plugs their line, it's not the city's fault. But
Right.
but if it is in the main line, the city has put a policy together where they will defray costs sufficient, at least, hopefully, to get the homeowners or business owners back on their feet and get the immediate damage cleaned up and save them from having to deal with it out of possibly a very limited budget and wonder what's going to happen. If the damage goes past that, then there has to be a more thorough investigation and finding of fact by our liability
Right.
carrier.
You know, there have been several bills in the legislature this past couple of months, and one that's been mentioned in the council chambers the last couple of times has been House Bill 397, which was introduced by Missoula legislature Squires, and it's got a number of other legislators that have signed on, but it's a bill for an act entitled "An Act Prohibiting an Incorporated City or Town or a County from requiring the landowner to hook up to a sewer line instead of replacing a septic system based on the distance of the land or residence from the sewer line." The city council, people like Craig Sweet have said that he doesn't like this bill. Should the city require people to hook up or to pay a fee even though they've got a perfectly good working septic system?
Well, I'm probably the only member of the city council that does like that bill, but the reason I do is because the city has taken their hookup policy and they've gone much too far with it. The county health department, for example, has a policy where if you have a building that has plumbing and the building itself is within 200 feet of a sewer line and your property is adjacent to the sewer line, if your septic system fails, you're not allowed to replace it. You have to hook up to public sewer. And I think that probably is a reasonable requirement. For one thing, if you've already got sewer adjacent to you, it's probably going to cost you no more to go ahead and hook up to the sewer than it is to replace a drain field or a septic tank. What the city's done, though, is they've taken that a step further, and they've said if your property is within 200 feet of public sewer, even if it's not adjacent to you, even if it's uphill, even if it's across someone else's property where you don't have an easement, you have to hook up. And what this essentially does is it holds people hostage, where if your septic system fails or plugs up and you need to get your plumbing working, the city will say to you, well, you can't put in a new drain field, you can't fix it, you've got to hook up to the sewer, but since you're not adjacent to it, we'll have to put together an SID and include all your neighbors in order to get it done. And it puts the homeowner in the position of going to their neighbors and saying, look, I can't flush my toilet unless you agree to join an SID at whatever cost it happens to take.
Right.
And that's happened before, where essentially you say you're holding people hostage, and I think that's an example of the government going too far in pursuit of what originally was probably a good objective in order to serve other goals.
Yeah, because I have had constituents, one in particular that lives in Ward 5, I believe, that even though she's not hooked up to the sewer and she has a perfectly good septic system, that the city is still charging her because she's within 100 feet of a connection, so she still has to pay the $50 every 3 months, I believe.
That's a different policy, and that is the availability, where the sewer charges the sewer user fee to anybody that they have to have a property adjacent to it to be charged that. And I don't fully agree with the rationale for it, but it is something I guess has been tested under state law and is legally defensible, so that they essentially are charging people who have that available to them, whether they're using it or not.
Right. And we kind of see that in different areas, like in the legislature, especially in work comp issues, where railroad workers actually have their own work comp system, but there's several bills in there that are going to try to force those guys to pay for the old comp fund. And so I look at the argument and say, well, should people that don't use the service, should they be forced to pay for it under those kinds of...
You mentioning the work comp strikes close to home. I'm self-employed, and I'm not covered by work comp, and yet this last couple of years on my tax return, I have to pay an old fund liability fee to help subsidize their deficit, even though like I say, if I'm run over by a truck, I'm not going to get any benefits from
Yep.
workers' comp at this point. And in fact, if anything, you could say I'm subsidizing my competitors that are covered by it. But no, I agree. I think if it's a community thing, then you can't break it down and say necessarily everybody's going to pay X amount depending on exactly what their interest or use in it is. But on specific user-oriented items, then we should try to be careful to see that the users are the one that carry most of the freight.
Yeah, one question I had with the city council is this phrase that I always hear from, especially from like Jack Reedy or Curtis Horton, you know, although a quorum wasn't present, the committee decided to recommend. And that always struck me as kind of odd because being from several nonprofit organizations, if we don't have a quorum, then that business doesn't get done that month, or we schedule it some other time to where we have a quorum.
Well, a lot of the city's business has to be done in a certain period of time because there are legal requirements, especially with land use issues, that you have a clock that's running on it. And you know, in deference to my fellow council members, most of them do have full-time jobs and they're supporting, you know, families in addition to being on the council. This is just something we do for fun and kicks and giggles, so to speak.
But then
For whatever reason, and so you do tend to miss some of the committee meetings from time to time, and you have to go ahead and deal with it anyway. And most of, and say anything that is brought out of committee without a quorum has to be approved at the full council meeting in any case. The committee meeting is simply a recommendation.
Right. Then the constituents would still be represented.
Correct.
To their views.
Yep.
Because I know with the makeup of the council these days is probably more liberal and conservative. Sometimes you get more of the liberal bias.
I don't know. Liberal and conservative is a hard thing to try to assign to local politics. I think it has more to do with neighborhoods than anything else.
All right. I think it's time for us to wrap up. I'm glad you could be here, Mike.
Great. Thanks, Mike.
You know, I think it's nice to come and talk to our elected officials and see what's going on. And
Pleasure to be here.
I think there's a lot of people that can't get to city councils or the city council, and see what's coming up, because I know that it's hard to follow the agenda and to know what's coming up week after week.
It's hard for us sometimes. Thanks again.
Well, thank you. And to sort of wrap this up, we're going to be showing some things from a couple of committees down at the state legislature that we taped on Monday. One of them is the Senate Bill 158, long-term care reform by Mignon Waterman. And the other one is the Medicaid estate recoveries by the same person, House Bill 236, which deals with trying to recover some of the Medicaid monies from people who I guess, as they claim, can afford to pay it, and who funnel their assets into someplace else. So we'll leave you with that, and join us next month, March 15th, for more labor revision and some more legislative stuff. Thank you very much.
Their sheets are right back there. Okay, with that, we'll open up on Senate Bill 158. 158. Senator Waterman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Mignon Waterman. I represent the people of District 26 here in Helena, and I bring before you today two long-term care bills, and I'll try to keep my comments very short on these bills. And we will start with Senate Bill 158 because the next bill probably is a little more complex and you may have more questions, so I'll try to move through this one fairly quickly. Let me tell you, first of all, that we've been working in the area of long-term care for a couple years because of the cost of long-term care in the state of Montana. This is one of the fastest growing areas of the Medicaid budget and one of the most expensive sections of the Medicaid budget. So in the last legislative session, we added language to House Bill 2 asking the department to consider community-based long-term care services that are appropriate and cost-effective. And the result of that language is Senate Bill 158. Senate Bill 158 is a policy statement implementing long-term care reform in the state and makes it the policy of the state to develop a system that allows people to stay in their own residence or in the least restrictive setting in their community for both the elderly and the disabled, develop state programs to help people coordinate those services in the community, and to develop state programs of assistance for elderly persons with disabilities that, again, allow them to remain as independent as possible. Also requires the state to work to develop cost-effective private financing of insurance programs that are affordable for elderly for long-term care. The state of Oregon has been very aggressive in developing community-based services. In the state of Montana, only about 1/5 of our long-term care budget goes to community-based services. The bulk of our funding goes to nursing home services, which of course are the most expensive services for elderly and for the disabled. The state of Oregon, through implementing aggressive policies such as this, have been able to direct approximately 20% of their long-term care budget to community-based services, even though they've seen a 40% growth rate in the number of elderly. They estimate that they've been able to save over $100 million, and as we have an aging population in the state of Montana, I think this is the sort of legislation we should be passing. Thank you.
Any proponents?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for the record, my name is Peter Blauk. I am the Director of the Department of Social and Rehabilitation Services. I have written testimony that I'm passing out. Inasmuch as you desire to limit the proponents to 15 minutes, I will abbreviate rather than read the testimony and just hit some of the highlights that I think are important. First, I would like to recognize all of the work and effort that Senator Waterman has put in on behalf of senior citizens in the state, and has worked very closely with the department to develop this bill. Senate Bill 158 has three components. First, it sets forth a policy for Montana's long-term care system and declares the guiding principles for the development and implementation of services within the system. Second, the bill mandates the bill mandates that various state agencies cooperate in developing, implementing, and coordinating state long-term care programs. And finally, Senate Bill 158 requires a report to the 55th Legislature on the progress of long-term care reform. This bill proposes to remedy many of the problems that are currently in our long-term care system, and sets forth a number of principles and policies that will guide the development of the long-term care plan for the state of Montana in the future. And a number of those principles and policies are listed on the second page of the testimony, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Briefly, to respect the dignity of the individual, seek to encourage a maximum level of individual independence, include community services which allow the person to continue to live at home, encourage services which are affordable to all Montanans, foster private financing of services, and be a system of coordinated services and programs which are accessible and cost-effective. The final point I would like to make, Mr. Chairman, very briefly, is that Senator Waterman has indicated long-term care is one of the fastest-growing portions of the Medicaid budget. We will be spending over $100 million in the Medicaid program on long-term care. These numbers can only go up as the demographics of this state and the nation's population change. We are going to have an increasing number of elderly, particularly as the baby boomers come into the system. And it's absolutely imperative that the state take a proactive approach to long-term care so that we can be prepared when this portion of the population really does begin hitting the service delivery system. So I think it's vitally important that the state take an aggressive, positive, proactive approach to development of a long-term care system. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I will be available for questions. We have staff if there are technical questions that the committee would like to ask.
Any other proponents?
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, for the record, my name is Evelyn Hafschald. I represent Hill County Area 10 Agency on Aging. I am testifying as a proponent of Senate Bill number 158. I believe long-term care planning is a key issue we must face in our state if we are going to meet the ever-increasing need for services of our elderly and disabled citizens, and this bill is part of the process. I would like to point out that under the Older Americans Act, as well as Montana's Older Americans Act, the Office on Aging in the Department of Family Services is required to coordinate and develop a comprehensive delivery system of services for Montana's elderly. In the last year and a half, the Office on Aging, through the Governor's Advisory Council on Aging, has taken an active role in beginning to address this issue. Through their actions, the Office on Aging has revised the area plan format to address long-term care issues and concerns in each county in Montana. But this is only a start. We need to develop long-term care plans for each and every community in Montana. If we are really going to identify the services available, the needs and the unmet needs of our citizens, and then lay out a framework for the next 10 to 20 years when everyone in this room will most likely be in their 60s, 70s, or even older. As a proponent for this bill, I ask for your support and recommend that the Office on Aging, as well as the entire aging network, have more of a major role in developing long-term care services, coordination, and delivery. Thank you very much.
Any other proponents?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Hank Hudson, the Director of the Department of Family Services, and I'm here to speak as a proponent, and I wanted to share with you that as we've been working towards a strategy for long-term care and all issues that deal with long-term care and aging, that we've enjoyed a close working relationship between all the departments and state government that address this issue, and we support this bill as the next step in getting together the best plan we can get as a state around long-term care. So I'm here to speak on behalf of the Department of Family Services in support of this bill and in support of the collaboration around this strategy. Thank you.
Any other proponents?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for the record, I'm Bill Olson with AARP, and very briefly, we stand in support of Senate Bill 158 and urge your concurrence. Thank you.
Any other proponents?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Charles Briggs. I direct the Rocky Mountain Agency on Aging based here in Helena. And I want to underscore, I'm speaking as a proponent, I want to underscore that the language of this bill is a result of a hard drawn study, both a study undertaken by SRS involving consumers and providers called SAIL, which you may have heard about and you may hear about more later. Also, there was a special ad hoc committee created, the Governor's Council on Aging, and also for the last 2 years in a parallel process with extensive state agency representation, looking at the whole issue of how to reform Montana's long-term care service delivery system. I would say that the language of this bill is a reflection and a product of both those two parallel study commissions, and I wholeheartedly endorse and request your concurrence with this bill. Thank you.
Any other proponents? Any other proponents?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Edmund Kaplis. I'm the Executive Director of the Montana Senior Citizens Association. We support this bill and urge you to pass that out of committee with a strong do-pass recommendation. Thank you.
Any other proponents?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Mary Allen and I rise on behalf of Montana Area Agencies on Aging Association. This is the association that has 11 different agencies represented. I have some written testimony, but all I will say is that we support Senate Bill 158 as it will provide the state and the community the authority to effect change and meet the increasing needs of Montanans for long-term care. Thank you.
Any other proponents?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Kate Haleva on behalf of the Human Services Foundation, and we urge your support on this bill. Thank you.
Any other proponents? Any other proponents?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for the record, my name is Charles Rabine. I'm the Coordinator on Aging in the Department of Family Services. I'm going on record as supporting this Senate Bill 158. The aging population in Montana is growing, as you're well aware. In the past 5 years, our senior population of the 85 and older group has doubled. It went from 10,800 to it's now a little over 20,000. The need for long-term care planning is essential, and I urge your support of this bill.
Any more proponents?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Mike Fellows, and I'm representing the Montana Coalition for Nursing Home Reform, and we too would recommend a do pass on Senate bill that you're discussing this afternoon. And we find that we do need to provide services that are reasonable and provide those services to those folks that don't necessarily need the skilled nursing care that can be better off at home or a personal care home. And I think there are some bills in the past legislative sessions that would allow Medicaid to do just that. But I also would like to make sure you look at the cost of what it costs to put people in skilled nursing cares, and also look at such things as the bed tax, staffing, and the licensing of professional staff. Because I think that just by submitting $20 a year on your professional staff, that sometimes you might not be getting the professional staff that we should be getting. Thank you very much for your time.
Any more proponents? Any other proponents? Any other proponents? Any opponents? Senate Bill 158. Any opponents? Any opponents? Seeing none, do you have any questions? No questions? No questions, but the Senator would like to vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you can see by the testimony and the lack of opponents that this has truly been a collaborative effort of numerous departments of state government as well as senior citizens groups. It has been a delight to work on this legislation. I've passed out to you an article. I'm sure that you're like me, you just need some more bedtime reading. But this is a good article that I think probably sums up as much the problems that we have created as the Medicaid system has evolved over the years, and that a number of states are looking at a fundamental systemic change in how services are provided. And that's what we're looking at in this bill, is we are implementing a fundamental change in how services for long-term care are provided. And I think you will hear in the next bill about the potential for the cost savings. I think if we can come anywhere close to what was saved in Oregon, this has potential of saving probably $13 million or so over the next 5 years or so.
We're in the waning days of the first half of the session, the 45th day, which is our transmittal for all the normal bills that don't affect revenue or the budget, to have to be over to the other house by the 23rd of this month. So the frenzy now is to make sure that the committees are doing their job of getting the bills worked on and amendments on or passed out of committee. And one of the problems with that we've experienced as Democrats is we're seeing that the notices that are supposed to be attached to bills and in the papers 3 days before hearing may not be getting done in some cases, or there may be some abuse of that process process that the public is not being notified. So we have to kind of make sure that we're watching to see that everybody has a chance to have input on the bills in the committees. And otherwise, I think it's proceeding in its usual fashion. We are, as Democrats in the minority, losing virtually every major debate on the bills, and we are not working in the bipartisan fashion that the governor, I think, challenged both sides with when we started the session. So we're still hoping, and we're still going to be working, presenting our alternatives at the appropriate times, and not just saying no to the Republican issues, just trying to offer reasonable alternatives. But so far, none of them have been accepted.
So some of the main issues are still things like taxation and the states' rights issue, I think, are some of the things that have had a lot of publicity.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, and for the public, the budget is now in the House Appropriations, and it won't come over to the Senate until after our break, about 14 days after the break, so sometime about the middle of March. But the cuts already, I think the goal is to cut the governor's budget, which was accepted by an awful lot of people out there, by about $100 million or more. And I think we've heard that in the Senate there may be an attempt to cut it to close to $300 million. And we're talking about children's programs, programs for the elderly, nursing home reimbursements, Medicaid cuts. I mean, there's some severe cuts that are going to be happening to services for Montanans out there, and we have extreme problems with the cuts that have been made so far. So we intend to fight those when it comes over to the Senate.
So is there a problem in terms of, I should say, bills that were passed last session that you have to come back and fix and then reference? I'm referring to a bill that I listened to this morning about safety committees, where they passed the Worker Safety Culture Act last time, and now they're going to change it to relax the rules, allowing businesses to
That's right.
exempt themselves from safety committees. What do you think about that?
Well, in every session, there are big pieces of legislation and packages we usually put together that are based on interim committee work, and those are usually well done, they're well thought out, but where you have just individual pieces of legislation being passed, normally the next session is designed to tinker with those and try to make them, in some cases, work better. In other cases, for those that now have the majority, it's an intent potentially to either repeal the law or change it to reflect a different philosophy than its original intent. And we spend a lot of time during the session doing that.
So what's coming up in the next week that the Missoula citizens should be worried about, or they should come and listen to?
I think the public in Missoula will be wanting to look at the major states' rights bills that are coming out in order to potentially that would sell state lands or request the federal government to sell its lands. And there, I think sportsmen and just people who want to preserve Montana's quality would be very concerned about that, because corporations would buy that land, or foreigners may buy that land and prevent our access. And so, or the wealthy could buy them. And so I think there's real problems with that. In the environmental area, there's some bills coming to the floor that will change the entire intent of the Montana Environmental Policy Act from one that is substantive to merely discretionary. So I think that is a fundamental change in the way we've handled legislation in the past and environmental review. So people should be very concerned that by the 45th day that some of this stuff may get shoved through very quickly. So the tax stuff does not have to come until after the break, nor does the budget stuff.
And I think that is something that we have to keep in mind as we address long-term care and as we address the Medicaid program, is Medicaid is a welfare program for needy. And I think sometimes in the area of long-term care, we have forgotten that. This country as a whole has forgotten that, and I think that's created some of the financial problems that this bill addresses. Congress enacted Medicaid in 1965 to ensure access to health care for poor women and children. It quickly became, however, the first major third-party financing source for long-term care in this nation. Over a number of years, estate planners devised ways to help people divest and shelter their assets so that virtually anyone could qualify for Medicaid long-term care service coverage. Let me give you a couple examples. Until changes in federal statutes and hopefully after the passage of this bill, my husband and I would be able to divest ourselves of all of our income and go on to Medicaid. In fact, when we moved my husband's mother, who is 92, here 5 years ago, we were urged to do just that. and we could have sheltered all of her assets and she could be on Medicaid. We chose not to do that, and because I don't believe that's what Medicaid was designed for. It was not designed for people with large assets to be able to shelter their estates and pass it on to their children.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Edmund Kaplis, for the record. I represent the Montana Senior Citizens Association, and we strongly support Senate Bill 236. We originally opposed the bill in the special session over the year that followed. We've had a long-running debate on this. It's an emotional issue, but we've come down to the point that this is about fairness, and in that sense, we support this bill. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Kate Haleva for the Human Services Foundation again. The Human Services Foundation is a wide variety of groups covering aging services, people with disabilities, low-income housing, job training programs, and also concerned individuals. And we rise in support of this bill. We feel that it puts the resources to those who need them most in this area. Thank you.
Chairman, members of the committee, for the record, I'm Rose Hughes. I'm the Executive Director of the Montana Healthcare Association. We represent nursing homes throughout the state of Montana. We are certainly in a position to see firsthand that the Medicaid program, which is supposed to be a program to pay for services for the poor, ends up, in the case of nursing homes, sometimes paying for services through Medicaid for individuals who have divested assets and could have provided for their own care had there not been the kinds of current loopholes and so forth that there are in the law. We think if the money is going to be available to pay for the individuals who are poor and need nursing home care, you are going to have to close some of these loopholes and figure out how to have Medicaid being what it was intended to be, which is for the poor, and that's why we're supporting this bill.
John Cobb, House District 50, sorry. I'm just supporting the bill, and I think it'd be a good idea. I know people don't like to crack down on senior citizens, but we're hoping to use the money to do alternative services out there. And if we don't do that, the senior citizen budget for Medicaid keeps growing and growing and growing, and we don't have very much money for children and young mothers. So it'd be nice to, if we do this bill, we can move some of the money to keep people out of nursing homes or alternative services, and that will lower the growth rates on those higher cost services, which frees up money for children and mothers out there in the communities. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for the record, Charles Briggs, Director of the Rocky Mountain Agency on Aging. I and my association support Senate Bill 236. I want to stress that I'm not sure how clearly it is indicated that this bill does bring us into compliance with federal law, and that has been an issue ever since the fall of 1993. And so there needs to be a product here out of this session that brings us into compliance with federal law. Second, I think it's the issues, and as has been noted, there was a lot of concern while this bill, I should say the earlier version of the bill moved through in the special session of the fall of '93, moved through the Senate. When it got to the House, it got bogged down with a lot of questions and a lot of concerns, particularly focused on the needs of the surviving spouse. And ultimately, it was tabled in House Judiciary because while there were assurances that those issues would be addressed, particularly in the administrative rules-making process, it was not satisfactory for the members of that committee. Certainly through the SAIL Committee and the Governor's Council on Aging, that process, as you have heard, has been worked through over the last year, and those issues, we believe, have been quite satisfactorily addressed. I certainly, as a member of those committees, have been quite satisfactorily addressed. And I guess the last thing I want to leave you with is, we hear so much about people, where the welfare system and how people take advantage of the system and how people shelter their assets so they can take advantage of the public resources. This bill, it really speaks to what services and these programs and the policy of the state of Montana have been designed to do, is to address the needs of those who are most in need of public assistance. Thank you, sir.
The states would go to families, friends, and others as a person who disposes their property as they wish. It seems people that have children in or out of wedlock, mothers and children, can go on welfare, and the boyfriend or the husband pays little or nothing to provide for their needs, and who pays? The taxpayer. A person can commit a crime, go to prison, and receive all the health care costs, educational costs, food and lodging, and any court costs, including many appeals, and who pays? The taxpayer. But a person who works their entire life, pays their taxes, pays their Social Security, they pay their medical and educational costs for their children, and they paid into the system all their life until it comes time to be placed in a nursing home, then you ask them to take the rest of their assets and put into the system again. It's the same people you've been asking to pay time and time again. If this continues, the middle class will no longer exist, and you will have the very rich who won't pay and the poor who can't. We are supposed to be a compassionate nation. When it comes to the middle class, that has been forgotten. The last election should have told everyone here that the middle class has had enough, and they are afraid we will end up like the third world countries, and I don't believe you want that. Thank you.
Yes, we're talking with Representative Bill Carey of House District 67 in Missoula. How has everything been going so far as being a freshman legislature? How do you feel?
Well, there's always this threat that you'll be overwhelmed any minute. Things are very intense, and the intensity seems to build here as the weeks go by. So we're passing a lot of legislation out of our Judiciary Committee, for example, that I think, we'll see. I think we're going to create a lot of work for attorneys. But by and large, the process is fascinating. It's all-consuming, and I feel it's a great privilege to be here.
I know you're working on several things, including a single payer with the Health Care Authority. Now, with the citizens of Montana basically saying that it's too costly, we don't want it. How's that going to work in the committee?
Well, Mike, I think that politically, single payer is not going to happen this year and probably for several years. I'm carrying the legislation because I believe that all Montanans have a right to adequate health care. And I think the single-payer system will ultimately prevail. I think most Montanans, and in fact I venture to say most legislators, do not really understand the single-payer concept and the nuts and bolts. I'm not saying that I understand all of it, but what I am saying is that once people learn more about what we're talking about, they'll begin to see that it makes the most sense. It will provide the most benefits at the least costs. And I think the time will come and we'll have it.
So what other issues out there do you think that are important to the people in District 67?
Well, I have an affordable housing bill that still is in committee. I'm hoping it gets out of the committee and gets to the House floor, and I'm hoping it does become legislation. And what that does is define what a limited equity housing cooperative is. And the limited equity housing cooperative is designed to make home ownership affordable to people who live on low and moderate incomes. And I know after going through my district that affordable housing is one of the key issues, probably along with things like affordable health care to the people in my district. So I'm hoping this bill gets out. It's not going to cost the state any money. What it's going to do is make it a lot easier for people to get together, form a cooperative corporation, and buy or build their own homes.